Let's talk about wide receiver, shall we? This is a position group that I felt entering fall camp had a lot of options, a lot of skill sets, and one football. And I felt like entering fall camp, I kind of liked Nick Anderson as LSU's leading receiver. His skill set was different than everyone else's. He had massive production at Oklahoma. Figured he would be healthy. And that was my pick. I don't think it's a very good pick. And that was in July. And I have the right to change my mind over the course of time, and did. But I had Nick Anderson in July. After about 3 weeks of August, I said, okay, Chris Hilton's the guy. Chris Hilton looks great. He is a deep threat. We know this. He's going to make chunk plays. We know this. I also think he's really good in the intermediate game. They're going to get him the ball in the screen game as well. I think Chris Hilton's going to lead this team in receiving. And one of my bold predictions for the season was Chris Hilton having over 1,000 yards. And then we play one game, and now I'm like, well, Aaron Anderson's probably going to lead the team in receiving. We had a station survey 3 weeks ago, and I gave Chris Hilton as my answer for LSU's leading receiver. Aaron Anderson was the most selected player, as he was LSU's leading returning receiver. But Aaron Anderson wasn't practicing a lot, and I felt like, well, the things that Aaron Anderson does really well, like you can let Barian Brown do some of that for sure. You can let Kyle Parker do some of that for sure. Like, I think they've got some options. Xavien Thomas can do some of those things. And I thought that Chris Hilton's skill set kind of separated himself a little bit, and maybe he was the guy. But the point of this timeline that I'm laying out is that there are just a lot of dudes they can get the football to. And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch this play out. Now, catches and targets are a little bit fickle. They depend on coverages. They depend on play design. They depend on the read from Garrett Nussmeier. They depend on the offensive line holding up. Like, yeah, over time you can draw long conclusions from them, but in the moment, in a short sample size, they can tell some lies. What doesn't really lie is the rotation. Like, that's something that is intentional, is independent of anything that goes on during the play, doesn't have to account for penalties. It's just who the staff put out there. So I wanted to start with the rotation that we saw in the game on Saturday. LSU played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wide receivers in the game. This is according to Pro Football Focus. The leader in snap counts, and keep in mind LSU ran 75 offensive plays. The receiver that played the most snap counts, he didn't play all of them at receiver, but was out there the most, was out there for 44 of the 75 snaps. That's Xavien Thomas. Now, obviously, you know he was involved in the run game as well, but he was out there the most. If you would have told me that on August 1st, I would not have believed it. Second was Barian Brown. Barian Brown played 37 of the 75 snaps, so less than half. Only one wide receiver played more than half the snaps. That's Xavien Thomas, who played some running back. Very little, but some. Aaron Anderson was third. You know he was a leading receiver. He had 99 yards in the game, but he was third. He played 35 snaps. Then you've got Kyle Parker with 26, Nick Anderson with 24, Chris Hilton with 24, and then Destin Hill with 2 before he broke his hand. So they did rotate liberally at wide receiver. You were not seeing a situation where on 75 offensive snaps, on 66 of them, a wide receiver was out there. They varied that greatly. And the question I have about that, which we won't get an answer for another month really, is that something they're going to do early in the season? Or is that something they're going to do all season? The answer may come because they feel like they found their top 4 guys, or because they feel like they've got to get everybody involved. This is not apples to apples. I want to be very clear. This is not apples to apples because the rotation wasn't because of the same thing, but it is the same head coach and just 1 year removed. Last year at safety, LSU was rotating a lot early in the season. You were seeing Jordan Gilbert. You were seeing Sage Ryan. You were seeing Kylan Jackson. You were seeing Deshaun Spears. Major Burns. Like, you were seeing a lot of different guys. And you saw that in the USC game, and you saw that against Nichols, and you saw it against UCLA. And eventually, you got to the bye week. And Ole Miss was next. And it was Major Burns, Jordan Gilbert, Sage Ryan. Kids, sit down. Now, they were looking for answers at safety last year. So, again, this is not apples to apples. But you saw a very clear decision that was made that here's who's going to play and here's who's not. And I'm curious if after a month of play this year, if you're not going to see this rotation. I mean, I don't know how much Destin Hill was going to play. I doubt he was going to play 24 snaps. But if you count the guys that played 24 of 75 snaps, that's 6 guys. And that does not include Trey'Dez Green, who does occupy a little bit of that same space on the field, right? So what do we think that number's going to be by the time you play Alabama in November? Do we think Aaron Anderson's going to play less than half the snaps in that game? Do you think Nick Anderson's going to play, I guess in this case, that's about a third of the snaps? I think it's interesting to monitor, and I think we find very little in the way of answers this week in Southeastern, because I think against Tech, because I think everybody's going to play. But I think once you get to Oxford, once South Carolina comes to town, I think you do get those answers. Let's look at targets. And again, I think that targets are a little bit deceiving in a small sample size because so much can vary them. But you look at targets among the players that had a reception. Aaron Anderson, 8. Baryon Brown, 6. Xavien Thomas, 2. Chris Hilton, 1. Kyle Parker, 1. Aaron Anderson clearly was a focal point in the passing game. Baryon Brown, clearly a focal point in the passing game. And then you go to Xavien Thomas with just 2, Chris Hilton with just 1, Kyle Parker with just 1. That's not intent to get those guys the ball a significant amount of time. Of course, Hilton's target was the 4th down. Xavien Thomas made a nice play over the middle when he came out over on a dig route. And then you saw Kyle Parker, who caught a ball over the middle when Nussmeier escaped the pocket, and it was on about his 3rd read going across the middle of the field. So the plays that were deliberately designed for players, it felt like Anderson and Brown were very much the 2 focal points. I think it's reasonable to expect that those 2 guys garner a large share of what LSU's trying to do in the passing game. I think that's reasonable. I'm a little bit surprised at Hilton's lack of production still, but I think he would be next on my list. I don't know what Nick Anderson's role is going to be on this team. And again, I'm admitting I was dead wrong in July saying that's going to be LSU's number 1 receiver. I'd be flatline stunned if that's the case now. I still think when it comes to Nick Anderson that he brings something that none of the other receivers do. That's a 6'3" frame with that speed and ability to stretch the field. So I'm not here saying, well, this guy's just not very good. I don't think they're going to play him. I'm just basing it on practice when he never ran with the first team, the snaps in the first game where he's significantly less than a lot of the guys, and then the targets in this game where he had none. So this, again, I'm not drawing sweeping conclusions from one game. This is a game where it felt like the plan offensively in the passing game was going to be to keep things around the line of scrimmage. And to keep things around the line of scrimmage, that limits Clemson's pass rush against what could be a compromised offensive line. I think they planned to play the game that way. And if you look at the guys that got a lot of snaps, it's the guys who are going to play around the line of scrimmage in tight quarters. It's Xavien Thomas, Baryon Brown, Aaron Anderson, Kyle Parker. Those are your smaller, shiftier receivers who can play around the line. Chris Hilton's not one of your smaller, shiftier receivers. He's one of your faster receivers. Nick Anderson's not one of your shiftier receivers. So this makes sense when you look at the game plan LSU had. But I believe LSU's going to force the ball down the field this year. They've got a quarterback that likes to do it, and they got plenty of playmakers to do it. You probably need to do it when you trust your offensive line a little bit more entering the game. And I don't know how much they did back on Saturday. So I'll be monitoring this. I'll be watching this. I think it's fascinating. I think LSU has a lot of options. And I think you're going to see the options play out game to game based on the matchup and the skill sets they want to use. I think it's a luxury, not an obligation, to get a lot of guys on the field. We'll see. Again, you're not going to learn a lot against Louisiana Tech. But you will at the end of September and throughout the month of October. And I'm curious about it because I don't have a set-in-stone answer for you. But it'll be something that we monitor week to week here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.